Welcome to the Health Ranger Report on Brighteon.tv. I'm Mike Adams, the founder of Brighteon, and today we welcome back someone who I'm going to kind of call the Nostradamus of finance. I mean, his predictions have been so right on the money. He's the founder of DollarCollapse.com. John Robino is one of our favorite guests here on this channel, and he's been right about where we're headed. And today I'm going to ask him about what's happening with the euro, what's happening with the yen, and what's happening, of course, with the dollar. And then we're going to talk about gold and then also fiat currency valuations versus commodities. Because it's one thing to see how currencies are doing against each other, but how are they doing against wheat or copper or gold for that matter? What about the suppression of gold and silver? So we're going to cover all that today. You don't want to miss this interview. If you have money at all, or if you deal with money, you're going to want to hear this information. We'll be right back after this break with John Robino from DollarCollapse.com. Stay with us right here on Brighteon.tv.
J&M Jewelry provides online jewelry appraisals that are convenient, secure, and affordable. Appraisals are usually completed within 48 hours and sent directly to your email. Contact us today or visit our website to use our appraisal request form. jandmjewelry.com.
At the Brighteon store, we offer a variety of colloidal silver solutions that we make in Texas using Texas rainwater and specialized circuitry that I personally designed to produce silver ions in purified rainwater. We have a colloidal silver extra strength spray, a silver-based first aid gel, as well as a colloidal silver herbal mouthwash solution that people just rave about. Each one of these is subjected to our rigorous laboratory testing for metals, glyphosate, and microbiology in order to ensure product purity and safety for your health. We manufacture our own silver products right in the heart of Texas and deliver them to you using our own warehousing and fulfillment infrastructure that we built to serve real America. All of us here at Brighteon thank you for your support. Shop our silver products at brighteonstore.com. All right, welcome back, folks. Mike Adams here on Brighteon.tv, and now we welcome John Robino, the founder of DollarCollapse.com. John, welcome to the show. It's an honor to be able to speak with you again.
Hey, Mike, it's good to be back. A few things have happened since we talked last. Huh?
When was it? It was at least 6 months ago, I think, that we did an interview. Maybe longer. It's been a while.
Could be a year.
Oh, wow. I can't believe that. Well, I've been watching you, and I've seen a lot of your other interviews. You're of course, right on the money. But, you know, since we talked last, obviously we have the economic sanctions weapon of mass destruction deployed against Russia, with them being cut off the SWIFT system. And then that set into motion this chain reaction, this domino effect that is looking to be rather catastrophic. So let's start there. What's your take on kind of where we are right now? This is early May 2022. What's the world looking like to you?
Well, the world is looking catastrophically crazy right now. There's so much stuff going on almost everywhere you look, and all of it is really ominous. You mentioned the U.S. using the dollar as a weapon against Russia, and I think that's one of the big untold stories, or mostly untold stories, that you won't see on CNN or someplace like that. And but it could be the most important thing to come out of what's going on right now. And the basic backdrop to that is that we have the world's reserve currency. The dollar is something that everybody has to have in order to buy oil or in order to back their own currencies with central bank foreign exchange reserves. And so there's huge demand for dollars out there, which is great for us. It gives us huge power here because we can just print as many dollars as we want and then buy real stuff with it. So that's how we've financed a global military empire that's bigger and spends more money than the next 5 militaries out there combined. And it does lots of other things for us. And it also, upsets the countries who are disadvantaged by it. And one of the ways a successful reserve currency operates is that it's neutral. In other words, it's not a weapon. If you use that currency, it doesn't disadvantage somebody else automatically. You're not making a political statement by using that currency. And we in the US have totally screwed that up because we've decided to use the dollar as a weapon. If somebody crosses us, we threaten to kick them out of the international banking system, or we freeze their reserves somewhere, we take their bank account. And so basically, almost everybody in the world is sick of the US dollar being used that way against them, and they're terrified that they're going to be next. So go ahead.
Well, but also to that point, I want to mention Canada, because this was a big shocker for a lot of people when the government of Canada ordered the banks to freeze or seize the accounts of people who made even small donations to the Freedom Trucker convoy in Canada. That was a big wake-up call to a lot of people to say, whoa, so this social contract between us and the banks, this doesn't mean anything. And then when Russia's foreign currency reserves to the tune of, I believe, $300 billion were essentially seized, or you could say frozen, that's essentially the theft of $300 billion from Russia, which is the same thing that Canada was doing on a smaller scale to its own people. So these two signs together have been sending out, major red flags to people who are paying attention, saying, wow, the banking system can't be trusted.
Yes. So whether you're a Canadian saver or a Russian oligarch or the central bank of India, you're all worried that your bank accounts, to the extent that the US has access to them, are no longer yours. Or for the Canadian saver, to the extent that the Canadian government has access to them. And what does that lead a logical person to do? It leads them to look for ways around the existing banking system. And what individuals are doing in a lot of cases is holding minimal amounts of cash in the bank, and they keep their cash at home, or they buy gold and silver, or they immediately convert their money into things like real estate or energy assets, that things the government can't just immediately steal from them, because apparently that's a thing now. Governments are just going to loot your bank account whenever they're mad at you. Now, as far as the global financial system goes, the impact of this is that a lot of these countries who have been victimized by the US's stupidity are looking for ways to trade and to back their currencies without using dollars. So you got Russia and China trading in their own currencies for oil and other things. And you've got Russia saying, okay, we'll sell natural gas to Europe. You can have as much as you want, but you have to pay rubles now. So all of a sudden, the Europeans are out there trying to figure out where to get rubles so they can buy their energy and not freeze when there's a cold night. And this is a very big deal from the point of view of the current global financial system and the US dollar, because there's maybe 10 trillion too many dollars out there if the world doesn't need dollars, and so people are going to start using their own currencies and dumping their dollars in order to get the other currencies they're using. Those dollars are going to come back here, and they're going to bid up US asset prices, which means they'll push down the value of the dollar. So that's very inflationary. The dollar will lose value to the extent that this process is happening. And we're making it happen. We're making the kinds of stupid mistakes that are going to lead to this tsunami of dollars coming back home and pushing up the price of everything here. So the inflation that we've seen lately is just a foretaste of what would come if we don't get our act together and salvage the dollar's role as a global reserve currency and do it quickly. It doesn't look like we're doing that. So there's more to come.
As you're saying that is exactly what I'm thinking, is that there are no signs of sanity somehow being interjected into this. There are no signs that the money printing will be held off. There are no signs that the Federal Reserve will respond to this in a rational way to try to stabilize the dollar. If anything, interest rates continue to be kept artificially low. Money printing is through the roof, insane. Biden is requesting, I think, another $33 billion in, quote, aid to Ukraine. I'm sure his family will get their 10% cut off of that. That's a cool $3 billion right off the top right there. But, there's no sign that any of this is going to return to sanity. And then when I saw that the UN's FAO was publishing month over month price increases for food of 12.6%, that's a month over month inflation in food. That's when alarm bells started going off in my head, because as you know, if you have 12+% per month, you double food prices in 6 months, and then you double it again in another 6 months. That's the track that we're on. People have no idea how catastrophic that's going to be for the world if food prices double in 6 months. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's an extreme inconvenience for us if food prices go up, but it's an existential threat for people in a lot of other places, because for most of the developing world, Thailand, Brazil, Mexico, places like that, the majority of the population is right on the edge. In other words, they can kind of make rent, they can kind of put gas in the car, and they can kind of feed their kids today. But you let the price of a couple of those things, and right now all of those things are going up dramatically, you let those things go up, and all of a sudden, those people have to make a choice between being able to drive to work or feed their kids. And traditionally, that's where you get riots in places like that. People just take to the streets because they don't have anything to lose. They're starving, or they're unable to work. And you get regime change, riots and revolutions, and that, since a lot of these countries are resource producers, in other words, they make and sell commodities in the global markets, revolution and civil unrest and general chaos there just makes the supply chains even more broken. So this runs the risk of kind of a doom loop where, a feedback loop in which each thing that happens makes things worse, which in turn makes other things break, which makes things even worse, and so on, and that's the kind of thing that we might be looking at in the year ahead, because, food price inflation is already kind of baked into the cake, because what happens in the agriculture market this year is what determines food prices next year. So to the extent that plantings aren't happening, and there's a big shortage of fertilizer because of Russia's sanctions and prices of fertilizer going up, so farmers are either planting less or just not planting anything at all, or using less fertilizer and getting smaller crop yields. All of that stuff is going to affect food prices next year. So the really big story isn't what's happening today with 15 or 20% food inflation. It's what happens next year when you get another 15 or 20 or 30% on top of the debilitating increases this year. So this thing has legs. This is a story that is not temporary. It's not transitory like the Fed was saying early on. At least that part of the inflation story has at least another year to run, and possibly longer, with a lot of unintended consequences along the way.
Well, let me ask you, in your assessment, you've been at this quite a while. When did you first launch dollarcollapse.com, by the way?
2004. It was originally a marketing page, a single page website for a book called The Coming Collapse of the Dollar and How to Profit from It, that Gold Money's James Turek and I co-wrote.
Okay.
And, so since then, it's been a site that's kind of evolved into a blog/news aggregation site. But throughout that whole time, it's been based on the same premise. Right. That we're making these catastrophic financial mistakes. We're allowing way too much debt to be created and too much money creation to service that debt. And it was going to destroy the fiat currencies of the world. So, at long last, it's starting to come true. The basic predictions: rising inflation, spiking interest rates, extreme financial volatility, all of that stuff probably should have happened a lot sooner. But the fact that everybody is armed with unlimited printing presses allowed them to keep fooling the markets for a much longer time than I expected. But can't fool people forever. And now it seems like those chickens are coming home to roost.
Well, after 2008, I started to wonder how much longer the system has. But of course, they bailed out the subprime mortgage collapse. But my question to you right now is, how is it that the powers that be, at the Fed, at the State Department, in the Biden White House, how could they have miscalculated so catastrophically about the results of disconnecting Russia from the SWIFT system, knowing that Russia has lived under sanctions for many decades or longer, if you go back to the Soviet Union, but they know how to survive. They have domestic sources, domestic supply chains. They're more resilient. They can live with less, whereas the West is completely unable to live with less. How could they have miscalculated the boomerang effect of how those sanctions are hurting seemingly Western nations and America far more than they're hurting Russia?
Well, that's a question you can ask about basically everything the U.S. has done for the last 30 or 40 years. How could they not know that they were screwing things up on the scale that they are? The Russia thing in particular is a fascinating mistake so far. We don't know how this is going to play out, and maybe these guys still have some hope that they're going to get something else. I think the expansion of NATO is very important to them. So they're willing to suffer economically. In other words, they're willing to let us suffer economically, because the guys making these policies they're not going to be hungry, and they don't care if gas is $6 a gallon. It doesn't matter to them. They're willing to let us suffer in order to, for instance, get Sweden and Finland to join NATO, and possibly even Ukraine after all is said and done. We don't know about that. But right now, it does seem to be backfiring on them because, for instance, the ruble tanked when those sanctions first kicked in. And then Russia came out with its idea of, kind of sort of backing the ruble with gold. In other words, buying gold with rubles at a fixed price, which didn't last, but they're still buying gold with rubles. And demanding rubles in return for energy sales, things like that. Well, all of a sudden, the ruble went back up on foreign exchange markets. So it's higher than it was when the whole war/sanctions thing started, which means Russia is really not suffering all that much. They're selling oil and gas on the global markets at extremely high prices. So they're making massive free cash flow from their energy exports. And at the end of the day, they're probably going to gain some of the energy assets of Ukraine. So it's not clear that they lose in all of this. Well, the future is obviously unknowable, but right now it looks like there's a good chance that Russia comes out of this in pretty good financial shape, and that the US, especially the dollar, is irrevocably tarnished. So it could be that we pay more of a price than we expected, which takes us back to your question of how could they not know this, And the general answer is that they're morons. They're just Ivy League educated people who have never had to deal with anything in the real world in their lives. They basically just got where they are by connections, and they do not know how the world works. In terms of monetary policy, they operate with these flawed Keynesian models that say, don't worry about debt. All you need to do is print enough new currency to generate 3% growth a year and you'll be okay. So what if it takes 8% more debt every year? Don't worry about it. Their models literally say that. And so they're shocked when the economy doesn't work the way it's supposed to. In foreign affairs, they seem to think that the US, with 5% of the world's population, is able to dominate the entire rest of the world and do anything we want to with impunity out there. Because remember, we're talking about Russia right now, but China might even be a bigger issue for us geopolitically pretty soon, because let's say we actually get involved in a shooting war with Russia, which is apparently what a lot of people in the government right now want. So we're going to be very distracted by that if it happens. So what's China going to do? They're going to take Taiwan because they know we're distracted. And then we feel obligated to defend Taiwan. So we're going to go over there and we're going to be in a two-front war with nuclear powers while we are rapidly going broke because of all the debt we've taken on during quote unquote peacetime. So 2 years from now could be an extremely dark time for the US when these mistakes actually bear the kind of fruit that they're liable to bear.
Well, and there's another factor. I mean, what you just said is very much on track, but another factor that I've recently become aware of is the fact that the supply chain for the domestic military production of missile systems and anti-tank weapons, munitions and solid rocket motors and so on, that supply chain barely exists in the United States. And a lot of the military production depends on supplies from China or Taiwan or other countries. And we don't have the human labor infrastructure nor the military weapons design infrastructure. We just don't have the designers focused on that anymore, where Raytheon Lockheed Martin recently announced that their next upgrade of the Javelin missile system and the next production batch will be 2027. Like, is America even going to be here in 2027? I mean, you guys are 5 years too late. And we're shipping thousands of missiles over to Ukraine, depleting our own stockpile, to the point where, and the reason I mention this is because we could be in a situation with that conflict with China that you just alluded to, where we don't have anything left except nuclear weapons, you see. And then that leads to acts of desperation and global annihilation. You think that's a possibility?
It's a very real possibility, apparently, based on the behavior of the guys in charge right now. They might force the issue. This kind of takes us back to the supply chain thing you said, takes us back to another example of the stupidity of the people in charge, and that is globalization. Over the past 30 or so years, the idea took hold that the way to run a global economy is to have everybody do the thing they're best at, and then create these long supply chains that include steps in different places around the world. You know, somebody mines something here and they ship it somewhere else for processing. They ship the process ore over to somebody else to make a component. The component goes somewhere else for assembly. And that's what you mentioned about weaponry right now. We've got that kind of a supply chain out there, which does work when the world is peaceful,
right?
And energy costs are stable, and there's no civil unrest in any crucial place. You can have a very efficient global economy with these kinds of long supply chains where everybody's doing the thing they're best at. But while they were setting these things up, they also, the globalists also developed this idea that it's fine to use the dollar as a weapon. And if anybody steps out of line with the US imperial project, to kick them out of the global financial system. Well, but some of those people are in these supply chains that are necessary. So we're stomping around the world, breaking these supply chains that we created. And that's kind of what we've got now. We've got a world of broken supply chains because of our would-be dictatorship that we're trying to create around the world. And so, yeah, it's hitting our military production at a time when you would think we would have a lot of extra weapons after spending $1 trillion a year for at least a decade on the military. But no, apparently we could easily run out of crucial components and literally crucial weapons if we try to use too many of them. So, yeah, we could be in a place where we need something from Taiwan, just as China is bombing Taiwan, and there's no chance of us getting that component. And so a whole section of our military has to shut down because historians are not going to be kind to the people who made these decisions.
No, and mentioning Taiwan, I mean, Taiwan's the world's largest manufacturer of semiconductors. You know, you have the Taiwan Semiconductor Company, which China would love to own and dominate, and yet America's military depends on so many of the microchip components from Taiwan and other countries, including Japan and South Korea and so on. So, you know, Trump was right about all of this. Trump wanted to have a more nationalistic, protectionism type of economy, especially when it came to military sourcing. And under Trump's administration, in fact, the U.S., under his direction, began to source domestically more of the rare earth minerals that go into a lot of these components and systems. And so we at least have that advantage right now. But as far as these other components, we could be in very sad shape very quickly. And let me lead into one more thing then to ask you. Seems like we're shifting from world currencies based on financialization, abstracts, just all these abstract concepts of what has value, into a world of commodities-backed currencies, which is what Russia has essentially declared. And who's got the commodities, or who's willing to mine them and export them? And increasingly, it's not America or the UK, largely due to environmental concerns, nor Germany for that matter, but Russia and China are willing to dig into the ground and find metals and sell them, or find energy and sell it to the rest of the world. So doesn't the future belong to really commodities more than just abstract money?
Yeah, we're kind of heading in that direction. And the Russia example is a very good one. The Russian ruble now is strong relative to other currencies because of the commodities that everybody knows are there and that can generate cash if necessary to prop up the ruble. So yeah, it used to be that, oh, we've got all these dollars on our balance sheet, therefore our currency is strong. That the dollar is a financial asset that has counterparty risk. In other words, somebody has to keep a promise for dollars or treasury bonds or bank stocks or most other kinds of stocks to be valuable. Whereas an oil well, if you've got it, you've measured what's there, you've set the equipment up to pump it out, then nobody has to keep a promise then. That's just there. Or gold sitting in your vault at your central bank. It doesn't matter what US foreign policy is if you've got a bunch of gold, because that gold it's inert. It's going to sit there. It's going to have basically the same value 20 years from now that it has today and that it had 20 years ago. And because of that, you're safe. So yeah, we could be going back to some kind of a commodity-based financial system with gold probably at the center. Oil and zinc and rare earths, they're very good things to have, but they're a little harder to measure and to keep track of, and their prices fluctuate with industrial demand and stuff like that. So they're not quite as good as a backing for a currency as something like gold, which exists independently. It's the ultimate neutral asset. I was talking about neutral.
We're about to, I'm sorry, John, we're about to wrap up this segment. Stay with us. We'll continue in the next segment, all about gold and precious metals. So thank you for watching today on Brighteon.tv. This continues on Brighteon.com.